Morning, everyone. A very good morning for those of you in DV 2022, because the government has announced that they've removed the procedure, which is around about the document procedure. And they're obviously doing that to try and help DV 2022 get as many cases processed as possible. So yeah, it's good news. I'm really glad they're doing it. And fingers crossed. Let's hope this is enough of a change and in good enough time for them to actually process a lot of cases this year. Let's fingers crossed about that. So thanks to those of you that are jumping on already. And I should say, I'm going to just post this here. Let me just get this here. I've posted a blog article which has some information about that, right? And I suggest you go and have a look at that. And if you're looking at this video on YouTube, it should be in the description below, right? So it's important that you read that and get some of this, information there, and make sure you're getting the accurate information, as accurate as we can make it. Let me just take some questions. Eli, do I think this is a good vibe for maybe passing the BBB? No, nothing to do with it at all. There's no connection between these two things. This isn't one. The government of the United States is not all working in one big room and talking to each other, with the politicians and people at KCC. It's not like that. These are different people trying to solve different problems. And in this particular case, Department of State and KCC presumably have realized that they're screwing everybody over with this document procedure they implemented about 4 years ago. And they're consistently being sued, right? In DV 2020 and DV 2021, they're being sued. And they will get sued again, right? They know that. And so this radical change they're making is probably, to try and help and do as much as they can to avoid getting sued, to avoid the chaos that they're causing through their dopey procedures, right? And their procedures have been dopey, let's face it. I mean, they it's not been good, right? So, but it takes a brave man, brave woman, brave organization to admit when they've done wrong and change it. And KCC and Department of State have done that. So, I'm pleased that they are at least doing that. Okay. Does it apply to DV 2021 people? Well, you should be documentarily qualified already if you're in DV 2021. So it won't really impact DV 2021. There is a question of whether DV 2021 processing restarts. It can restart one of two ways. One is through the lawsuits, but that's a limited number of visas and will go to those people who are documentarily qualified. There are more people DQ than not in that case. Could they take that restriction away and apply it to based on case number order? Is possible, but we'll have to wait and see. The other thing that could happen for DV 2021 is that the BBB bill is passed, which will reopen the doors for the wasted visas to be issued. And who knows, right? We don't quite know what that will mean, how that will be processed, when that will be processed, when the bill goes through. We don't know any of that. So I don't want to speculate on things that we don't know about. Just no point in trying to speculate on that. So for now, let's not even talk about DV 2021 and whether it applies to them, because it's just not going to, it's all going to be speculation. So Joyce, you haven't been asked to submit your documents yet. Well, that no longer matters. It doesn't matter that you haven't been asked to submit your documents. If you submitted your DS-260, you're ready for interview. That's it. You don't need to submit your documents. You will need to take your documents to the interview, of course, and you need to make sure your documents are in good shape. Don't waste time on that. Don't get to your interview and say, "Oh, I didn't have my police certificate." Don't screw yourself up. You still need to prepare as if you need the documents, nice and early. Police certificates are now valid for 2 years. There's no need to not apply for those. So So make sure you're properly prepared. But now that, that whether you've submitted your documents to KCC or not doesn't matter, because they're not going to ask you anymore, right? Popcorn is out. Ready for another info session. Thank you, Christo. Is it a good news? No, I'm not going to talk about DV 2021. What about already DQ'd case number? Yes, this is interesting. So the interesting thing is the way they've written the announcement talks about the DS260 being received. It doesn't say received and processed. Now, I've made this point in my article. I'm a bit skeptical of this. Let's talk about what jobs they do at KCC, and perhaps to make this clear. So they have about 30 staff when they're properly staffed at KCC. I don't think they've got all 30 staff at the moment. I think they're running with something less than that. 5 of those people work on document processing up to now. Obviously, those people no longer have that job to do. They may have either lost their jobs or they're going to be switched to other jobs. I'll talk about that in a moment. So 5 of those people do that. Some number of people do DS260 processing, and DS260 processing is opening the DS260 and figuring out what documents should be available, right? Because when the documents team look at the case, they know whether you've submitted the right number of documents or not, and they will let you know. I mean, they're supposed to. They don't do this very well, but they will let you know if you're missing a document. They don't tell you which document you're missing, because that would be too helpful. So they like to keep you guessing. So they just say, no, you haven't sent us all the documents yet. But anyway, this is all gone, right? But that, so it's predicated on some team processing the DS260, not just receiving it, but processing it. Then you've got some people who are answering the phones. They're not answering the phones right now, right? So I think mostly because they're not in the office. And you've got some other people that are answering emails, right? And responding to emails. And just recently, we've seen that they've been far more responsive in answering emails. Interesting that that's been happening over the last 2 weeks or so. They've been answering emails within a few hours. So it seems that, they've got more people answering emails. They don't have the people back on phone calls yet, but they've got people answering emails at least. And the other job that KCC do within that team of 30 is that they schedule the interviews, right? And in the last few days, we've seen them scheduling interviews that really shouldn't have happened, because they were not documentarily qualified. They hadn't even received DR, or, all sorts of weird things have been happening. And also they've been scheduling appointments in December, which is nuts. Like, it's as if they've been sued. We've only seen this activity before when they've been sued, and then react, according to a judge's order or a judge's, statements or opinion, published opinion. So what they've been doing in the last few days was obviously weird. And I posted about this yesterday. I didn't know about the announcement they were going to make today, obviously. But I posted yesterday that there's clearly something was going on, right? There was something weird happening. And in these Telegram channels, people are worried about, they've not sent any DSs for 4 days. And oh man, stop focusing on the document submission and the DRs and the DQs, etc. And that's what I was thinking yesterday. And then today we see why they haven't been sending those for 4 days. So, some of you have been obsessing about this crap. And it's been driving me nuts, I have to say, because you're obsessed with it, right? But now, what are those people who are obsessed with it going to do with their lives? I don't know. It's going to be different. Anyway, so of the team at KCC, they answer emails, they answer the phone, but they don't answer the phone. They set up interviews, they process the DS260s, and they process the documents. About 5 groups of people, right? And there's some interchangeability between those groups, except for the documents team. The documents team were managed totally separate to the first 4 groups. And there was no communication, and that was part of the problem that they introduced about 4 years ago, there was no communication between these teams, and it was really badly implemented. So so that group of people now have gone. So those 5 people now switched to doing other activities. They're not answering the phone, so maybe they'll be answering emails now, right? Maybe that's what's happened in the last few days, and that's why we're getting lots of emails answered quickly. Maybe they'll be scheduling interviews, right? Well, again, in the last few days, we've been seeing them schedule interviews out of the blue for embassies, all over the place, and it's been happening in a weird way. It's been happening in December and January, interviews being scheduled on, like yesterday, I think I heard of a couple. That's the 8th of December, scheduling January and even December interviews. Is weird stuff. Shouldn't normally be happening. I'm happy that it is, but maybe that's because the people have been switched. You see, from the document processing, or from other groups, and then of course DS260 processing. If their statement is accurate, and there is no more processing of the DS260, because the statement says the DS260 simply has to be received, not received and processed, just received. If that's true, I'm skeptical about it, because normally the DS260 processing includes name checks and background checks. There is another team, not part of the 30, at KCC, that are a security team. And so if there are fraudulent issues or terrorism suspicions or anything like that, the KCC DV team could refer that to an internal team that is about background checks. If they're not doing those background checks, if they're not stopping people who chose not to put in their passport when they entered, if they're not going through and saying to the DV documents team, you should be getting a marriage certificate because this person's married and they've traveled to 3 countries, and so you should have 3 police certificates. If they're not doing that work, are they literally just saying, okay, the DS260 is submitted, so we're ready to schedule? So in my article, in my blog article, I'm making that assumption based on what they've said, because they've said, and I speak English pretty well, right? Probably better than these Americans. But they've said that the DS260 simply has to be received. It doesn't say received and processed. So I'm assuming that they understand how to write English, probably a bad assumption, to be honest, and they know the impact and the import of what they've said. They've said received, not received and processed, right? Now, if processing has to happen, it will change things dramatically. So if the first assumption is true and it's received only, then basically if you've submitted your DS260, you are ready for interview. Nothing to it, right? Based on your case number and your case number becoming current, you're ready for interview. That's what received means. If the DS260 has to be processed in some way, in some additional way, then the point at which cases were getting document request is basically now the DQ level, right? So as soon as the DS260 has been processed, but there is a significant difference there, because DS260s were being processed by submission order, date of submission, and that would still apply an order. Whereas if it simply is a matter of being received, I could submit my DS260 yesterday and I'm ready for scheduling today, right? So there's no processing time at all. So we'll have to wait. I would say we'll probably have to wait. I'm sure we could ask KCC this question, but to be honest, I don't trust their answers. I don't trust this statement completely. And I would prefer to see what they actually do rather than what they say they're going to do, right? Because if you phone some staff, or if you're able to email the staff at KCC, it may not be a precise answer, and this statement may not be a precise answer. So I'm a little bit sort of unclear about that. So Veronica, long-winded way of coming back to your DQCN, right? If you're already DQ'd, lovely, but it doesn't make any difference now. It's a question of your case number. If you were DQ'd and you had a high case number, which is possible, it's kind of bad luck. It's kind of bad news to you, because you're now going to wait until your case number is high. And as I say in my blog article, there is a risk now for high case numbers. Okay, so I explain that, and I'll explain that a little bit later in this live. Okay, so let's see. Okay, so I constantly get this sort of question: Have I got a chance for interview? You know, with this case number. In this particular case, Etienne is asking with an AF 41,000 number, right? Now, I think people need to understand we have been damaged. DV 2022 has been damaged, right? We didn't get any interviews, or more or less no interviews in October, more or less none in November. They're trying to repair the damage, and they've set up some interviews in December, but there weren't that many. And they had tried, and they were setting up interviews in January, but again, they're sort of working hard to get that done, based on when Tier 4 prioritization was removed. But we have lost some time. Now, if we'd only lost 2 months out of 12, that would be okay, right? There is time in 10 months to process 55,000 visas, right? That's roughly about 28,000 approved cases, roughly. That would be, in 10 months, that would be 2,800 interviews, 2,800 interviews per month. There is time for that. There is time to do that in 10 months, right? There's time to do that in 8 or 9 months even. You know, they can move that quickly at full capacity. However, there are plenty of problems. We've lost a bit of time, yes. We now presumably don't have to worry about, you know, processing, but we still have to worry about COVID impacts. We still have to worry about embassies being closed. You know, we still have to worry about some of those factors that we can't think about, right? That we don't know what's going to happen. I can't tell you what is going to happen with Omicron variant, for example, in Africa, or in other parts where it's now there. We don't know if there's going to be another variant. We just don't know, right? So are you safe? Now, AF 41,000 is not a particular high number. It's not too bad of a number. So in theory, you should be okay. But I don't know which embassy you're at. I don't know what the position is at that embassy. You know, it's difficult for me to say with certainty. And you need to be a little bit sort of, you know, self-controlled about that. You need, nothing is for certain until you've got your visa in your hand. Okay, that's the way it is. The DV lottery is not a guaranteed visa. You don't have a right to the visa. It's a privilege. Immigration is a privilege. It's not a right. Okay, so some of you are going to be horrified by what I just said, but you don't have a right. By being selected for further processing, you don't have a right for the visa. You have an expectation of being processed, and we'll push very, very hard from a legal point of view. And I've helped some of the lawyers who do that. We'll push to get everything possible for you, but at the end of the day, you know, nothing is guaranteed until that visa is in your hand. And even then, as we've seen in previous years, with your visa in your hand, without lawsuits, you can still be blocked from coming into the country. So, you know, because there is this presidential power that can block entry. We've never quite succeeded in removing that totally, but we have changed the rules a little bit in a couple of the lawsuits to allow people with visas issued that the government didn't want to issue, that we forced them to issue in DV 2020. We forced the lawsuit won the position which forced the government to allow those people to enter. They really didn't want to do that, but you know, that's what the lawsuit achieved. So you know, you're not guaranteed anything until the visa is in your hand. So Etienne, just be a little bit careful. And I'm talking to Etienne, but I'm talking to everybody like that, right? You need to understand that. Yeah. So Faza is probably exactly right here, that there is an impact, a negative impact to high number cases that are already DQ'd, as I just mentioned. So, you know, well done for figuring that out, Faza. Really good news. The case number is AF2000 from Ethiopia. When should I be expecting interview? I don't know. I'm not going to try and predict what will happen in the next few days, few weeks, etc. I'm hoping that things will be returning to normal very, very quickly, but we have to just see what happens. And I'm assuming you've submitted your DS260, but I can't get into predicting. Yeah, you'll be interviewed on Tuesday, or what time of day on Tuesday. I'm not going to get into those sort of estimates, etc. OC 2300, is it a high case number? Yeah, it is. The highest case number in DV 2022 for OC is about 2500. So you're within a few cases of the highest case number. OC, funnily enough, generally doesn't hit its limits. There's normally capacity. But OC 2300, yeah, it's getting a little bit borderline, depending on who's applied, right? EU 12,000, when can we be current? Right, let's talk about the visa bulletin. So this announcement today is going to dramatically change how the visa bulletin runs over the next few months. The visa bulletin is calculated, it progresses, the numbers move based on the share of the visa work that the government wants to handle month to month. They roughly want to split it up into the 12 months and handle, more or less, they want to handle the work in those 12 months. Actually, they want to split it up quarterly. They prefer to look at it quarterly. And roughly speaking, they want to do a quarter of the work each quarter. But in DV 2022, the first quarter is going to be nothing like meeting the expectation. But what it means is, for the next 3 quarters, they will want to organize things that they're issuing about 15,000 visas per 3 months, per quarter, right? In order to issue 15,000 visas per quarter, they need to issue, let's say, 5,000 a month, which is about 2,500 interviews per month, successful interviews per month. So they would schedule about 3,000 per month. So it remains to be seen whether we're going to see that sort of pace happening or not. They can actually do a little bit more than 3,000 interviews a month. In normal times, I've seen that happen. But that's roughly what the expectation will be. Okay, so then in order to yield 3,000 interviews, how many cases are the demand? That's what they look at. That's how they set the visa bulletin. They say, okay, the next month there should be 3,000 interviews. That means we've got to move the visa bulletin to this number based on the demand we can see, right? Now, the demand up until today was based on cases documentarily qualified, having processed the DS260 and having processed the documents. Now, it's not DS260 processed, perhaps, and it's certainly not documents. So that means there's a lot of cases suddenly who are the demand. They're considered the part of the demand bucket. So the demand is enormous and the capacity is limited. So what we should see, and I don't know that we will see this, but what we should see is cautious, careful movement of the VB for 2 or 3 months. And we should not see regions going current, probably not by the end of the year, right? We shouldn't see regions going current. We'll have to see. We'll have to wait and see. It's difficult to predict exactly what happens with the visa bulletin. It's difficult to know how quickly this information will feed through to the visa office. Charlie Oppenheim, who was running the visa office numbers and running the visa bulletin, has just recently retired. I don't know who his replacement has been. I actually emailed Charlie Oppenheim earlier this year with a long email explaining how badly this document procedure was screwing up the lottery and how it was screwing up his management of the numbers. And I explained in great detail, probably too much detail. I don't know if it was too much for him. That the DQ thing was nonsense, and that what they should do is that they should be counting demand as DS260 submitted. That's the true demand. And hey presto, that's exactly what we've got now, right? The number of DS260s is the demand. So So, one way or the other, and it's not because of my email, I'm not saying that, but one way or the other, we've got what I was asking for, right? So, so I'm pleased we've got that. But so yeah, we'll have to wait and see how that goes from a visa bulletin point of view. But I am expecting now to not see regions go current in March or April as we have seen before. Okay. Will cases be scheduled on CN or DQ date? And if the case is later, would it be DQ date or DS submission date? Yeah, so this is really an interesting question. We don't know, of course. DQ date, the reason DQ date has been important is that it's a standard thing within the immigration law. If you look at other cases, if you look at family sponsored or employment sponsored, there's a point at which you become documentarily qualified, and it's called your priority. There's a priority date thing, and so they tried to take that part of the law and apply it to DV, and from that we get the DQ qualified date as being a significant driver towards when you can be scheduled if all cases are current. However, this decision makes case number more important again, which is how it should be. That's how the law is written. Case number was supposed to be the method by which cases are ranked. The law talks about a rank order, and so your case number is now the most important thing. And assuming that you've submitted your DS-260, simply submitted it, then then your case number should be what drives all of the scheduling. We'll have to wait and see specifically how they do that. Whether there'll be any aspect of when you became documentarily qualified. It doesn't make sense to me that there would be any aspect of that. It should just be around case number now, but we'll have to wait and see exactly how they implement that. What I understand from this news is fiscal year wise, it's good for high case numbers as things will go faster now. Visa quota side, it's bad for high cases. Sort of, yes. Yeah, I see your point. I understand what you're saying. Abdul Salam. That's sort of an accurate way to put it. It's good for all cases because things will go faster. This can fix the problems that we're in, right? The DQ thing was bloody horrible. I've complained about it for years. Many of you who have only been in the lottery for the last year or two have only seen the bad times. But of DV 2020, DV 2021, DV 2022, all of which were affected by COVID, right? But the document procedure were impacted badly, DV 2019, and I think even DV 2018. It's messed us up for years, right? It was badly implemented. I'm thrilled it's gone. It was a bloody nightmare. Now, the government do also talk about this being a pilot program, right? So they leave a caveat that they could reintroduce this later. I tell you, they'll get sued to hell if they reintroduce this later in DV 2022 because they could really cause some chaos. If they reintroduce the document procedure. Imagine if 4 months down the road, they now say, oh, well, we want your documents again. And everybody's got to scramble to do documents, but we'll run out of time. They will be sued to hell if they pull that sort of stunt. So they talk about this being a pilot program, but I honestly don't see how they could reverse this decision now in any legitimate sort of way without causing chaos. They could maybe re-implement it for DV 2023. We'll have to wait and see. But I can't see how they could re-implement this in DV 2022 and not do so without destroying the chances of people, by suddenly re-implementing this barrier in front of them. It would be a nightmare. So I agree with you, Abdul Salam, that things will go faster now for processing in general, but because of the quotas, you're right, as I pointed out earlier, there's less chance for high case numbers now because there are 119,000 selectees. There are 55,000 visas to go around. Some of the 119,000 selectees have got married, so that's increased that 119,000. Some will have died, sad to say. Some will have divorced. Some babies will have been born. Those babies and marriages increase the 119,000, and that tends to be the bigger push than divorces and deaths. So the number tends to increase over time, and the quota doesn't increase, and the time isn't increasing. So so we have a set amount of time to do this. We have 55,000 visas, and almost double that number. More than double that number were selected. Not all of the selected people will have applied. Roughly in a normal year, about 65% of people selected apply for processing, roughly. But that still means there are too many people for too few visas. And there is no more document barrier now. So yeah, for a high case number, it's got to be a bit worrying, right? And keeping safe with my work. Yeah, I'm supposed to be at work. So I got a few minutes left. Thank you for reminding me not to get fired. Nikhil says, I got DR twice, once at the beginning, the other getting document received email. Why? Don't worry about it. Who cares? Why are you asking? Right? Forget document request, forget document qualified. Doesn't matter. When will the lawsuit of DV 2022 begin? I don't know. I've just had some conversation with someone about that just in the last couple of days. I don't know. This particular impact will change things. I think we need to give this a month or two to see how things get improved, and it would be difficult right now. It would be difficult to sue the government and say they're not doing enough when they've just radically changed things, and they're doing that with an idea to improve the speed. So we'll see. There is, by the way, there was a statement by the Embassy of Tashkent, which you can go and have a look at, the US Embassy of Tashkent, which published some information about them trying to schedule interviews for February of next year. And they referred to a worldwide scheduling problem, right, that KCC are working through, that they're working through with KCC. Now, that could actually be something that they're enduring right now. It could be adding to the problem. Curtis Morrison noted something about this, which was a comment made about the NVC systems the other day. NVC is not part of KCC. KCC is not part of NVC. They're separate organizations, but they use some of the same technologies, right? So when the MVC comment was made, and we didn't have a lot of proof about it, it was just something that was said in passing that Curtis talked about, as I understand it. There wasn't sort of any document proof or sort of official statement about this. But there was a suggestion that there's some problem with the scheduling process. And it seems like they're doing some really wacky stuff at the moment. So it could be that there is also a scheduling problem. And what do you do if your scheduling problem is down and your technology is failing you? What do? You've got 30 staff, or let's say 25 staff, and some are doing document procedures, and some are doing this, and some are doing that, and all of a sudden you realize that something is broken and you're going to get sued again, right? What do? You take all the 25 people and you say, okay, you're going to be answering emails, and you're going to be setting up interviews. We won't bother to do the documents, and we won't bother to do anything with the DS260s. We're just going to schedule people, and we're going to answer emails. All of us. That's what you do, right? If you have to, if your house is on fire, you do what you have to do. So, that's the situation that we may be seeing, that they may be doing things manually by scheduling, in which case we could see some very interesting, wacky stuff going on until this is resolved. We could see 2NLs being sent out all over the place in the month, not just immediately after the visa bulletin and just before the end of the month. We could see all sorts of things going on, right? So nothing is impossible right now. We've just got to sort of wait and see what happens. Okay, so Etienne, when will the lawsuit begin? As I say, I don't know. I have to see. Yeah, what will happen? Fatty's asking, what will happen when... hello, Fatty, by the way. What will happen when VB become current? Because previously the priority, blah, blah, blah. And you said a couple of times, what will happen when VB becomes current? And I think the thing that we need to understand is that the VB becoming current, which is an expectation people have had over the last couple of years, that's probably not going to happen now, right? It shouldn't. If it happens, well, if it happens, we got a problem. What they should do is that they should manage the progression of the visa bulletin, making case numbers available that they know that they can service, that they can issue visas for. They need to have the capacity in the system, and they need to have the visas available. They should not be making case numbers current that where there is no visa available for those cases. So we shouldn't see all regions going current as we've seen in the last couple of years. Those instances were a mistake because of the problems that we've been seeing and because of the bad information being fed to Charlie Oppenheim. So your question, Fadi, is a bit mixed round. That's what I mean there. So my question is, when the visa bulletin goes, same question Mohammed is asking there. How much time do we have to wait for the result of the appeal? Well, I don't know which year you're talking about. The appeals for the legal lawsuits, appeals can take over a year. The question you should be asking is what will happen between now and when the appeal is finished, because the appeals of the DV 2021 lawsuits, etc., will take a long time. The Gomez case, by the way, I understand the last date that it can be appealed by the government is Monday of next week. So I'm expecting them to appeal that on Thursday or Friday, today or tomorrow. I'm expecting them to appeal DV 2020. If they don't appeal DV 2020, they more or less automatically lose DV 2021 appeals, which they've already filed, right? So why bother appealing DV 2021 cases if you allow the precedent of DV 2020 to go ahead? They more or less have to appeal DV 2020 in order to preserve their chances of stopping the visa issuance in DV 2021. So I'm expecting the appeal to come today or tomorrow, possibly Monday at the latest, but I think it'll be today or tomorrow. Okay, so the question then becomes, does the government apply for a stay? A stay, so right now the judge has said you need to issue the visas as soon as possible, but no later than the end of the fiscal year, DV 2022 fiscal year. And that's the case for DV 2020, the 9,095, and for the DV 2021 cases, the reserve visas in those, right? It doesn't say how quickly they need to start. It only says when they need to finish by, September 30th, right? So the question is, with the appeals, once all the appeals are in place, do they have to continue? Do they have to continue issuing visas while they are appealing? And the answer to that is yes, unless they apply for a stay. A stay is we'd like to suspend your order, Mr. Judge. We're going to ask the judge to suspend the order while they have the argument about appealing, right? They haven't asked for a stay yet in any of the cases that I know of. So that will be the question, whether they ask for a stay or not, or whether they just sort of put the pedal to the metal and they issue all the visas and effectively they will moot out their own appeals. It seems a bit strange to do that. So I'm sort of expecting the stay to be a part of what we see over the coming months. And I sort of expect the government to delay issuance of visas on DV 2020 and DV 2021 for at least a couple of months more, because they would want to give themselves time to produce the stay. It's apparently quite a high legal standard to obtain a stay of the order that's already in place while the appeal goes through. But unless they get the stay, then the appeals will come too late to stop the damage being done, right? So, because the visas will be issued and people will enter the country. So that'll be that. So there you go. That's about the appeal. All right, I've only got a few more minutes, but let's just take a few more questions quickly if I can find some good questions here. Okay, so this question is from someone who says Yazir chose the exemption at first. I'm not going to deal with whether your exemption request was valid or not. But the point is, in respect to this situation, you now get to make your argument for your exemption in front of the CEO. Up to now, you needed to get documentarily qualified, which meant proving to KCC that you had some sort of reasoning behind not submitting your passport. It wasn't that KCC were adjudicating that piece of your case, but they simply sort of held the cases back a little bit while people were asked to provide evidence, and people were confused about how to provide evidence and that sort of thing. So that would have killed a number of cases. Now, with this new decision, you're going to get scheduled for an interview, and you're going to prove in front of the CEO and make your argument for why you didn't submit your passport. I don't know whether they're going to refuse cases based on invalid, non-legitimate reasons or not. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. We've not seen enough cases processed. My feeling is, it seems to me that they're not going to refuse cases based on illegitimate use of the exceptions. We'll have to see. Okay. Go plaintiff. Daughter is hoping to apply for a student visa. She's a derivative and submitted. Will this be a problem for a student visa? Having applied for an immigrant visa is not a complete knockout for a non-immigrant visa, but it makes it a little bit harder because you have shown that you have intention to emigrate to the USA. So it's a factor that will be considered in the non-immigrant visa, but it doesn't mean that you can't get the NIV. It just means that that's one other factor. What's important in non-immigrant visas is that you demonstrate some ties to the home country, usually by way of a job or family ties or reasons that you will return. And if you can't satisfy the CEO that you will return, then they can refuse the visa. And so the fact that you've submitted an immigrant application, the DS-260, increases the suspicion that you won't return to the country, your home country, once your visa is finished. But it's simply a factor. It's not the whole story, right? Okay. Yeah, so the process, so Maurice is asking to explain the process without the document procedure. Simply, you press DS-260, you press submit, and that's it, right? There is no sort of, according to their statement, which I sort of take with a pinch of salt, I'm a bit skeptical about. According to the statement, simply when they receive the DS-260 application, you are then ready for scheduling. You're not documentarily qualified, you're ready for scheduling, okay? I'm using that different term, RFS. I used to talk about RFS all the time, but you're ready for scheduling, right? Now, that is based on you having submitted your DS-260 and it says the word complete, but that happens immediately, or completed. That happens immediately. It's instant. It's electronic. It's not, there's no sort of stage in between you clicking that button and the DS-260 being received. It's instant. Is there a processing thing that's going to happen? I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. That I discussed that earlier in the live session here, and I've explained my concerns in the blog article that is linked. Okay. Okay. A couple more questions and I'll call it a day. You had issues with the documents. You reduced the size from 20 megabyte to 5 megabyte. KCC replied they've received them. What now? It's interesting that you figured out that the size was the limitation. Well done for doing that. Now it makes absolutely no difference. The fact that you went through all this hassle with your documents, Clan Chief, doesn't make any difference. I think, are you the person, I think you had documents that were like 21 megabyte. And I think I remember mentioning to you, perhaps somebody else, that it was a bit close to the 25 megabyte. And so I'm glad you found a way to reduce them. But as I say, it doesn't make any difference now. It's completely irrelevant. They don't need your documents anymore. Yeah, it's not important. Okay. Quick question there. Will Bangladesh be able to participate? Probably not. The reason that some countries are restricted from applying for the DV lottery is where their existing immigration from other sources, work-based and family-based sources mainly, is over a certain threshold, 50,000 visas, over a 5-year period. And Bangladesh exceeds that. Now, the only thing I would say is that for about 2 years, we've had a real cutback in immigration numbers, which will affect that 5-year rolling period. So we might see some countries coming back for a year or two back into the DV lottery. Would that happen for Bangladesh? I don't know. Probably not. Is my assumption. We'll have to see. But it shouldn't. The diversity visa lottery is about diversity, and there's enough Bangladeshis coming through alternative means. Same as British people. My own country is excluded. Same as China. Same as India, Pakistan. There's a bunch of countries which already send enough people, and the diversity visa lottery is about diversity. It's about smaller, underrepresented countries. Okay. Yeah, the cross appeal. The cross appeal is so Chuck Cook explained this by saying that they didn't file the cross appeal. So when the government filed the appeal in the Go case, Chuck Cook then said, okay, well, if you're appealing that, we're going to appeal the ruling on the numbers. We don't believe that the judge calculated the numbers correctly. We would like to open that argument back up. Chuck didn't want to do that before because he didn't want to have an appeal going. It would have been a risky thing to have an appeal going for the numbers if the government had not appealed. Like, why question? He was. Sometimes, have you ever heard the phrase "a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush"? You take the certain result, the 491 or whatever it was. You take that, right, because that's golden. But once the government were appealing the whole ruling, then the cross appeal came from Chuck Cook and Co. And so he did that very well. But the cross appeal is on the numbers. He's trying to get more visas reserved, is what he's trying to do. Okay. Okay. Will the next visa bulletin give us an idea of how quickly they will move or what cases numbers they will get to? No. Don't assume that. Don't make that assumption. The next visa bulletin has already been decided. It would have been decided. It's normally decided by the 8th. And it will be published probably early next week, right? Now, if they delay it, if it's published later, then maybe it will have been impacted by this decision. But I think that we're going to see it published as normal anyway, and it will see some progression. So, expect a few thousand case numbers increasing. It's the visa bulletin after this one that I would expect to be impacted by this decision, and perhaps the one after that. So it may take a bit of time for this decision and the impacts of this to feed through to the visa bulletin. And as I say, visa bulletin is fairly difficult to predict. Sometimes they've got strategies that we're not really aware of, and there's information that we're not aware of. Sometimes they just get it wrong, frankly. But we'll have to see how that goes. But don't make the next visa bulletin as the proof of how the rest of the year is going to go. That's just not a wise assumption to make. Okay. Okay. Let me just scan down, see if I can get some later questions here. Wow, loads of questions. Loads of questions here. So this is, I don't know what that 30 is, but there you go. It looks like some sort of donation, so thanks for that, whatever that is. But it makes it yellow on my screen, so it does the job. It makes that question attractive. Can you guess if AS 8000 for DB 2022 is a high number? No, it's not. It's not a high number. The AS numbers go to about 30,000 roughly, and I think Nepal goes to about 12,000 and Iran is probably about 20,000 or something like that. The cutoffs for Nepal and Iran come before the end of the year, but before the end of the range rather. But 8,000 isn't a high number. The quota for Asia is about 8,500. Most of that goes to Nepal. A lot of that will go to Iran. And the rest of Asia, the other countries in Asia, sort of, fight for the rest, as it were. But 8,000 isn't a particularly high number. It's actually not too bad at all. Okay, there is time to get to that number with the decision they've just made. Okay, do you think DB 2022 will be a lucky year? I don't know. I mean, we'll have to wait and see. I hope it gets fixed. I hope this makes a good difference. We'll have to wait and see whether this change is enough of a change and in time. Right? A similar question here, similar question, Raj, to the one I just answered about 8,000. Your case number is higher. Yours is pretty high in the range for Nepal, but I think there's 3,700 selectees in Nepal. So you might be okay. You're probably about 3,500 selectees in, roughly speaking. So you're probably okay. Do I think that cancelling all B1 visa interviews is a good time? How much time does it take? The B1 interviews thing, we can't really say whether that's a good thing, but it does increase capacity that's available for immigrant interviews, so that's a good thing. How much time does it take for DR to be DQ? No time now. There's an irrelevant question. This whole video is about the fact that they've removed that whole thing. There is no more DR or DQ. There's submitting the DS-260 and that's it. Okay. Based on what they're saying. If I hope I addressed it. I've addressed this in the blog. If DS-260 submission is not the only thing, if it's submission and processing of the DS-260, then there will be a DR sort of level and there will be a sort of a DQ sort of level, but it will be much faster than it has been in the past because it won't involve documents. Okay. How much time do we normally get to get ready for the interview? Normally it's 5, 6, 7 or 8 weeks. It's in that range. You would get an interview scheduled, let's say in December. They're scheduling February interviews, right? So you normally have quite a few weeks. However, in the last couple of days, I've seen interviews scheduled with like 7 or 8 days notice. Now that's okay. Your documents the most important documents are the ones that you submitted to KCC. They're the main documents. You should be able to get your other documents together fairly easily. The most difficult thing is getting the medical arranged in a short time. And some doctors won't do that. But you can normally, in most countries, and there are some countries this is not true, but in most countries you can attend the interview prior to the medical. In some cases they won't let you do that, but in many countries you can do that, and all it means is that you'll be on administrative processing after your interview until the medical results are received, presumably a few days later. Okay, so if you can only get the medical the day before the interview or something like that, that's okay. But as soon as you get your 2NL, you want to be booking that medical, right? That's going to be the most important thing. Okay. Yeah, I'm just looking down some other questions. Does this mean a lot more people will be rejected or stay on processing because they're not bringing all the documents to interview and could possibly result in all 55K visas being granted? I sort of understand your thought process there, but the way to think about this is yes, more people could be interviewed that possibly wouldn't have, got to the interview stage before. But generally speaking, there's still going to be more than 55,000 people who are qualified, who are documentarily qualified, in reality, who have the documents to pass the interview. So, this is like going back in time about 4 years before the document process was in place. And yeah, we probably saw slightly higher case refusals at interview at that time, but not massively higher, right? I must admit, I mean, your question is interesting from the point of view of saying what value did the document submission process, what did it add? Did it make things better in any way? Sort of. It meant that some people who just had no hope of being approved at the interview never made it to the interview and therefore didn't waste their $330. Other than that, didn't really make a lot of difference, really. The percentages of refusals are marginally different now than they were 4 or 5 years ago. Okay. From now on, will we get an email saying our case is ready to be scheduled or directly to NL? I don't know. I suspect that people will just suddenly get 2 NLs based on their case number now. There's no real need for them to send out, and it's frankly not even technically accurate for them to send out an email that says you're documentarily qualified. They may send out those emails still that say things like you are current for processing. Actually, that's probably another impact that I should make people aware of. Once your number is current, and previously you were documentarily qualified, you went into this sort of limbo period where you were simply waiting to be scheduled, and that normally happened a couple of weeks later. But during DV 2021 and DV 2020, it became a problem because there wasn't enough capacity in the embassies to see everybody that was DQ and current, right? And that got especially bad when they made everybody current, right? And KCC don't like to unlock your DS-260 once you're current for interview processing, meaning you're current and assigned to the embassy. So since that assignment is going to happen faster now, you need to be very careful that your DS-260, if it's inaccurate, you need to unlock it as quickly as possible. And hopefully before you're current, because some people were so worried about unlocking their DS-260s, they would rather have an inaccurate DS-260 than risk unlocking. They were wrong. I've said before they were wrong. Delay is always better than denial, right? Being refused is no fun. Being delayed is a little irritating, right? But so you should have been unlocking your DS-260s and correcting them previously. But if you didn't do that, you better get on that now. Unlock your DS-260 and correct it, right? But will we get DQ letters and that sort of thing? I don't know. We'll get 2 NLs, of course, and we may see that email that says you're current for interview processing, a very special stage. But we'll have to see. It partly depends on the capacity of the embassies. Question I've already answered there. Okay. Let's see if I can find one more. I'm just scanning down towards the end. So if you're asking a question, there's tons of comments. There's really way too many questions and comments for me to be able to answer. I'm sorry. I was just trying to catch up here. Yeah, sorry. I'm scrolling, going all the way down. It just keeps scrolling. New comments. Okay, good. Okay, so a couple more questions after we've watched all these things. how can I ask how much you think it's probable that the government cancels the lottery program in the near future, as it seems to be just overhead for the government? Absolute bullshit. It's not going to be cancelled. For every year for the last 6-7 years, there's been talk of cancelling it. More than that. Every year. I mean, I've been doing this now 8-9 years, whatever it is. Every year, someone says, "Oh, it'll be cancelled next year." It's not. It's not because it's overhead for the government. That's nonsense. The DV lottery program is a part of immigration law. The government don't get to just turn it off. The government don't get to do what that stupid lawyer said, where he was suggesting that we could turn off 1 year of winners and process the DV 2020 or 2021 cases in that year. He doesn't get to make that decision. The program is set up in law. Now, if the legislators, if the government, the Congress, etc., go through a process of changing the law and changing to some different form of immigration, yeah, okay, that could happen. They've talked about that. Lots of people have talked about that, but it's not going to happen like next year. It's not going to happen quickly, and we'll have plenty of notice of that happening. All right. Immigration reform is difficult to do, as we're seeing even now, right? And governments can't get their act together. So it's like Trump, when Trump said he wanted to cancel the lottery, everyone was freaking out about that. But he didn't have the right. He's not a king. And it's difficult to change the laws. And until they change the law, the lottery will continue. And I don't care if it's overhead for the government. That's what the law says, right? How is Poppy? Thanks for asking, Malia. Poppy's great. We love Poppy. I'll have to bring her on camera sometime. But yeah, she's great. Okay. Why did they accept 119K if they only give like 20K? Well, this will be the last question. Why do they overselect? They overselect. It's not that they plan to only give 20K. They've given 20K in the last couple of years because things have been screwed up through COVID and through the Trump's bans and that sort of thing, right? They've lost time. They don't promise to give 55,000. That's not the case. But there is a sort of legislated cap of 55,000, 54,750 or whatever it is. But why do they select so many more people than that? It's because a lot of people don't apply. If they only selected 55,000, they would only give away 30,000. So they select more, knowing that some people won't apply, and they make it very clear in the selected letters, the congratulations you've been selected, that you're not guaranteed the visa. And in fact, if you read and understand the terms, it makes it clear that the rank number is important. It's how it's supposed to be. So they over-select, knowing that some people will not apply, some people will apply but be refused, and so on. And they do that with the best intentions. It's 119,000 though is probably too many. The year tends to work better when they select between 85 and 100,000. 119,000 is really too many. And so it represents a case where some people will probably miss out with the very highest case numbers. Okay. And we'll know what case numbers are the highest case numbers in January. On January 1, we get access to the SEAC data, which is, it gives us every case number that's a real case number, etc. out there. We get all of that information, and we'll know exactly how many people are, holding high case numbers and that sort of thing. So we'll have that from January. Okay. All right, everybody. I'm going to have to call it a day there, and but thanks for your time in joining me, and hopefully you'll realize this is good news. There's going to be some changes because of it. But this is a good thing that's going to hopefully move us on a bit faster. All right. Okay, everybody. Thank you. Bye-bye now.